Hello, and welcome to your inner journey weather forecast, in which we utilize archetypal astrology to understand the energies in the collective this week and how they might show up in your psychedelic journeys, how you can navigate them in your psychedelic journeys and your spiritual practices, and how you can help the collective bring them to their most noble manifestation. My name is James Moran. I'm an archetypal astrologer, and we're here for the week of August 22nd through August 28th. And let's have a look at the transits this week. So I hope everybody had a great full moon. The full moon was over the weekend, and the full moon was on a Sun-Jupiter opposition. That's this right here, Sun-Jupiter. Sun opposite Jupiter, there's a description right here. Great position to have a full moon. Very uplifting, optimistic, kind of a full moon is like hitting a bell that has a sustain to it, because when you have the full moon, whatever the full moon is on, it kind of hits a note and sustains it for a little while longer than the full moon. So like for a week or so after, there's a little bit of note of that note. And it was on Jupiter because the full moon is Sun opposite moon, and that was right on Jupiter. Sun was opposite Jupiter. You might have seen Jupiter in the sky right next to the full moon. Beautiful sight, looked really gorgeous. So a nice positive note to kind of set us off here. It is on the backdrop of the Saturn Pluto transit that we're having. It's far from exact. It was exact in 2020. It's far from exact, but it's still operative. It's down here at the bottom. You can see this line here on the bottom. That's the Saturn Pluto. It's 14 degrees. You can count the degrees here. It's 14 degrees off exactitude, but it's still active because there's a 15-degree orb in which they can be together and still be active. So it's still active, thus, putting masks back on. This threat of mortality, of pandemic is back upon us. And, personal space, borders, boundaries, all of those Saturn Pluto things are re-emphasized. They will leave the 15-degree orb, I believe, around October, November. And then they'll be out of orb. So they're no more Saturn Pluto until the next round, several years down the road. So nevertheless, it's here with us. It's nice to have more brief transit, a full moon right on Jupiter, Sun opposite Jupiter. It's nice to have that in the midst of a larger, challenging outer planet transit. You might have felt the full moon in your psychedelic journeys as a kind of a hopeful cast, a hopeful hue to your experience, a kind of a sense of even in the midst of difficulty and crisis, that there's a kind of a silver lining or a gold lining or a grace. There's some note of grace in the air. So that was the full moon. That was over the weekend. This week, the predominant aspect alignment here is Mercury opposite Jupiter. You can see it right here, Mercury opposite Jupiter. You can read about it here if you like. It's great Mercury has to do with the mind, thinking, perceiving, communicating, expressing data, like consuming data and transmitting data through communication, through writing, through corresponding. Neptune is the archetype of the infinite planes, that which has no boundary and no center. So interesting combination, because it can make our communication it can make the quality of our communication very refined. We can tend to communicate about spiritual topics. That's a very Mercury Neptune thing. Communication, Mercury, spiritual topics, Neptune. Or we can communicate or perceive and pick up data in a way that's subtle. Sometimes people during transits like this have what's called like extrasensory perceptions. They are able to perceive, that's Mercury, the mind, perceive data that is so subtle, you wouldn't normally be able to perceive it in our normal faculties of time and space. That's the Neptunian quality. Sometimes people get, in psychedelic journeys, they might get messages from the spirit realm, something like that, in a transit like this. Can be very productive if we really lean into our intuition and lean into the more subtle sides of perception. If we really try to go hard in a linear type perception, like we're going to write a scientific paper, or we're going to go on a psychedelic journey or meditation intensive and really examine it with a scientist's mind and a very linear thought, we may get muddled, we may get confused, disoriented, may get caught in a dreamy state. These are very Mercury Neptune things. So the best is to keep your intuition close during a Mercury opposite Neptune transit, and allow your intuition to guide you at this time, even in your psychedelic journeys. Allow your thought to be non-linear. Allow your intuition to guide you, allow your subtle perceptions to guide you. There's also coming up next week is Mars opposite Neptune, but it's Mars transit's coming early because Mars is the archetype of action. It likes to leap into action. So Mars transit's coming early. So there's a little bit of a flavor of Mars Mercury together opposite Neptune this week. Mars makes it more forceful. So like for instance, in psychedelic journey, a forceful message, receiving a forceful message from spirit, from an intuition, or a message about assertiveness. That's the Mars, message about assertiveness. If we have some pent up things that we need to say that we're kind of holding back, the Mercury, Mars, and Neptune can kind of make it slip out, or it can make it kind of become expressed and said in your environment without you even saying it. So it just kind of leaks out, whatever is the pent up anger or resentment or something like that. So it's best to just let things flow out. Let things flow out during this transit. If you got a journal. If you got a free write. If you're on a journey and you need to just say things, hey, maybe you'll just speak in tongues. Doesn't matter. Just let it out. That's better, because in a transit with Mercury like this, Mercury has to do with water and flowing. If you try and keep it inside, it's going to flow around the boundaries and get out anyways. So we want to just let it flow out. Let the message come in. Let the expression, the message of your own flow out. And then as we get in next week, it'll be a very tight Mars aspect to Neptune. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But for now, that's enough for now. Watch your Mercury opposite Neptune. Great time for dreaming, great time for daydreaming, great time for picking up subtle messages, great time for listening to your intuition. So that's our inner journey weather forecast for this week. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm James Moran, archetypal astrologer, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.